So I was doing some thinking the other day about what's changed in 2025. For those of you who don't know, I'm doing this series specifically starting in 2025 where I'm painting a canvas a day, and I'm sure many of you can relate. Whenever you do something daily, you kind of don't see what's happening. You know what I mean? In the same way that like when you get taller, you don't notice you're getting taller because you see yourself in the mirror every day. When you're making progress in anything, I don't think that you see it more explicitly. Sometimes there's little things where you're like, wow, I couldn't do that a month ago, but for the most part, you fail to see the bigger picture when you're in the middle of something, right? And because of this, every now and again, I like to try and think about how far I've come or how far I haven't come or just what's changed in general. Specifically, I feel like this kind of always happens with me around like June, July-ish. It's middle of June, towards the end of June at the time of recording this, so it's getting to that time of year where half of me is like I'm not making enough progress this year, the other half is like, wow, I've made so much progress. I don't know if any of you guys go through this. Maybe I'm just not saying anything that anybody gets here. The one thing I was thinking about is how much less I feel like I know about painting. Like, specifically looking at paintings, not my own painting, because I want to remove this from my own artwork for a second here, and I want to talk about paintings in general, right? If you talked to me a year ago, specifically 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even more so, I could walk into a museum and I could very well articulate my thoughts on everything I was seeing. I could see a Picasso and give you 20 reasons why I thought it was great. I could see a painting I don't like and give you 20 reasons why I think it's bad. I would definitively be like, I think I know what's going on here. I would have an impression that I was educated in the field of art, whatever that looks like. I would have that impression of myself and act as such. Coming here now after completing almost 200 paintings, which honestly still isn't a ton. I mean, in terms of what I hope to accomplish someday, in terms of how many paintings I would like to be making, this still isn't that many, but 200 more paintings than I had before nonetheless. I feel like I know so much less, and I kind of felt bad about this at first. I was like, why does it feel like I'm going backwards? And I kind of want to talk about two things here. First of all, is one that I was thinking about that I think could be a whole Paint and Talk in its own right one day. I would really love to have a discussion about this, because I think that we all have the impression that being confused is a step backwards. Like if you know how to do addition and then you get confused about how to do addition, you're going to assume, oh my god, I've lost grip of this skill I had, right? That's a very natural thing to think. I think math's actually probably a pretty big example of this. Let's say morality. I think morality is a little bit of a better example. If you're like, I think I know what right and wrong looks like, as many people are, and then you're like, I don't know what right and wrong looks like, I think it's very common to interpret that as like, I've lost grip on things. I don't know myself anymore. I don't understand the world anymore, or I've become confused, and we see that as a step backwards, but I don't know, I think as I progress in everything I do, I'm more inclined to think that confusion's a step forward than backwards. Because confusion, in many ways, I mean, there's, obviously, I'm not going to be able to nail down totally what confusion is in a YouTube video, but confusion is more or less a process of admitting you don't understand something, right? If I'm confused on how to get somewhere driving, I'm in the process of figuring out how to get there. If I'm not confused about it, that means I either know exactly where I'm going, or I don't know at all that there's even a route that I need to be looking at, right? And of course, in something like driving, that's a very easy process. You don't know anything, you're not confused, and you get confused and you look it up and you're not confused anymore. In things like acquiring any sort of skill, painting is a great example of this. You don't know you're confused, it's where I thought I was, and then you do understand that you're confused, which is where I feel I am right now, and I can't help but question, is there going to be another side to this? Because so many things there isn't another side of when it comes to these things that are more subjective, that aren't as easy as, finding a route on how to get somewhere. That's why I wanted to step away from the example of addition I was using before, because I think that's a really bad example. I don't think that really works, because there's a way to do addition. Once you know addition, There's no further step to addition that you could get confused about and figure out in your own exploration. I'm sure there's gonna be somebody that knows math way better than me that's gonna be like, there is a step to addition that you don't know about, and that'd be crazy. But for now, I'm gonna say that addition's a fairly cut and dry subject. Something like painting isn't, and I think that especially I want to take a moment to reflect upon how this has affected me in terms of criticizing art, because I think that the less you create, the more you feel you know about art. I think this is why critics. And I want to do a whole thing on criticism, because I think it's a necessary evil. I'm not somebody that's as much as I think all art is subjective, and I don't think you can possibly criticize something, I think that having a healthy ecosystem of people criticizing things is actually a good thing for art. I do like the fact that we have people going, this is good, this is bad, because I think that's a necessary thing, right? Otherwise, I think our entire landscape of what's good and bad will look a lot like social media, where everything is getting an equal amount of praise, and I think it'd be a lot less fun than having something like the Grammys that, maybe always snubs the winner. I'm still mad that Brat didn't win last year, but is all around still that's cool that I can root for an artist and really get into this, right? Criticism, though, is an interesting thing, because as somebody who used to make a ton of stuff centered around it, right? I used to make tons of my only subject on YouTube used to be criticism that I would discuss. You think you have it all figured out when you're criticizing something. I'm going to use a song as an example here, because it's the only thing I can actually still think about from a critic's perspective, because I don't know how to make music at all. Not one bit. I cannot make music. I've touched GarageBand 3 times, and I play around with BandLab on my phone because I think it's fun. I don't know a thing. So I can still think about it kind of from the lens of a critic will go, oh, the drums are good, or they're getting their meaning across very well here, or the melody's good, the rhythm's good, this synth is kind of off tonally. You can break things down to these elements, similar to how in a painting, I think critics often will look at things like color and composition, and put almost this veneer of objectivity on your ostensibly still subjective criticism, right? And I think that leads to this impression that you can reverse engineer this, right? If a critic were to make a painting, they would choose their color palette, they would lay out a grid, they would choose a composition, and then they would execute the painting of whatever picture they had, probably using a reference, I would assume. And that might lead to a very technically proficient painting, but it would lead to a fairly lifeless one. Lifeless one. I would lead to a fairly lifeless one. I'd be willing to bet. Because that's really not, the deeper you get into these, the more you understand, I don't think that's how art works. Having these skills are useful, but just as, having a hammer and a bunch of nails doesn't mean you're about to go build a house, having these tools in your tool belt of understanding color and composition, which is something I, by the way, still am not good at. I'm not saying this from any perspective that I'm above people who are technically proficient. I'm not, by any means, but having these tools in your tool belt does not mean that you are somebody that can build a house. You still need a lot of knowledge, and you still need a lot of experience. Building a house is something that is a little bit different because there's a way to do it, but in painting, especially because there is no one way to paint something, oftentimes I find the way it happens is through just doing. And that's why I feel that as I've gotten deeper into this, I've lost grasp on every sense of I think I know how to do this that there is. And it has led to me being, quite frankly, just the world's worst critic. I cannot tell. I've always said that I can't, I have this thing with food where give me gas station sushi and I won't be able to tell it from a 5-star sushi. I will not. I've never been to a 5-star sushi, but a nice sushi restaurant where it costs you $20 for that little thing of sushi. I hate those places. I genuinely cannot tell the difference between that and gas station sushi. I just don't have the taste buds for it. And I've actually come to that place now with art where all of it feels equal to me. You know, I made this thing a while ago about being pretentiously unpretentious, how like I've consumed so much art over the years, and I talk about kind of, you know, my journey through consuming art and how it's led me to this point where I don't have where I'm so unpretentious about, like, I believe that Mean Girls is on par with The Godfather, to the point where I'm pretentious about being unpretentious. It's kind of a inadequate title for what I was trying to get across in that video even, but that's the gist of it. And I actually think one of the reasons I did label what I was feeling there so inadequately is because I didn't fully understand it. I think part of the reason I've come to this place too, that I've only realized after thinking about this year and what I've been doing this year, is in large part because of the fact that I have been making so much stuff. Like, it's almost like my taste buds for art have gone just as dull as they are for food, and all I can tell is, honestly, and maybe this is a bit strange to say, and it's almost conflicting with everything else I've said, I feel like the only art that I can adequately critique at this point is my own. Like, outside of just reading something or viewing a picture and being like, I like this or I don't, everybody can do that. I can obviously still do that. I'm not like losing my capabilities to read and write or anything like that. But when it comes to like critiquing art, like looking at a painting and being like, this is off, this stroke is weird, there's no feeling in that stroke. The things I used to do every time I went to the Met, I can only do that with my paintings now. And I think this speaks to something that I feel like people say a lot, but I think almost the statement misses the nuance of how profound it can be, is create more than you consume. You know, when you consume a ton of paintings, you feel as if you know what a good painting is, and then you go to create one, and I don't know, right now I feel like my discovery is that there's no such thing as a good painting. Maybe one day I'll come out on the other side of it understanding what a good painting is, but I don't know, I don't think that I will. There's this Russian novelist whose name escapes me, and he has this whole thing where he writes down his thoughts on every other Russian novelist. And many other great novelists are in the world, like Hemingway's, Orwell's, like that stuff, right? And like, he gets to Tolstoy, and he's like, he's okay. Like, he's getting to all these people who are considered the greatest of all time, and he's just like, they're alright, they're whatever. And listen, we can't discount the fact that this is a Russian man. If this was, you know, a French guy, I think this would be different. We know Russian people, I mean, like, listen, I feel like the stereotype of Russian novelists is not that they're the most joyful at all, but still I found it so interesting that, like, I would assume, I found the list interesting at first, and then I was like, this is so stupid, this guy doesn't like anything. And, you know, I think we assume somebody who's great at writing books would be great at reading them too, but I think maybe he got so good at writing them, he lost his ability. I forget his name again. Maybe it was Gogol? Maybe? I don't know. He's written some amazing stuff. He's considered to be one of the greats. And he couldn't put down any adequate critique at all. And that's why I think that there's a good place for criticism of the arts. I also think it's interesting, though, what happens when you create so much art that you're unable to critique it anymore. And I think that that's a place that I think we should all be at in our own journeys, or whatever I'm trying to say here. This is the painting, sort of an inversion on yesterday's. I want to focus on the green since I focused on the yellow in the first one and the blue in the second. Don't know how I feel about this whole thing. So yeah, nothing. I got nothing. Go follow the Instagram. This will be up later this week, I believe. Yeah, this week. Later this week. I think yeah. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint Talk episode 174. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.